My daughter-in-law calls me every night, always at the same time, and asks, "Mom, are you alone?" If I say yes, she hangs up. If I say no, she insists on knowing who I'm with. Last night, I lied and said I was alone. I never imagined it would save my life. My name is Sonia, I'm 70 years old, and for the last 3 months, I've been living through something I can't explain, something that steals my sleep and makes me doubt everything I thought I knew about my own family. It all started so subtly that at first I thought it was my imagination, that paranoia that sometimes creeps in when we get old and are left alone. But no, it wasn't my imagination. It was real, terribly real. I've lived in this house for 42 years. My husband built it with his own hands, brick by brick, window by window. We raised our son Victor here. We celebrated Christmases and birthdays here, and we cried here too when life hit us hard. 5 years ago, my husband died. A massive heart attack while he was pruning the orange trees in the backyard. There was no time for goodbyes, no last words, just silence. A silence that has filled every corner of this house ever since. After his death, I was alone. Victor was already married to Patricia, living in the city, about 2 hours away. At first they came often, every weekend. Patricia was kind, even affectionate. She'd bring me flowers, help me in the kitchen, sit with me on the porch drinking iced tea while the sun set behind the mountains. I thought I'd been lucky, that my son had chosen well. How wrong I was. The visits started to spread out. First every 2 weeks, then once a month, then almost never. Victor always had an excuse: work, a business trip, important commitments. Patricia stopped coming with him, and when she did come, she wasn't the same. Her smile was different, forced, as if every minute in my house was a sacrifice. Her eyes studied me in a strange way, scanning the walls, the furniture, the photographs, as if she were calculating something I couldn't understand. Exactly 3 months ago, the calls began. The first was on a Tuesday at 9:15 at night. I remember the time because I was watching the news. I always watch it at that time. The phone rang, and when I answered, it was Patricia. Her voice sounded tense, hurried. "Mom, are you alone?" she asked, without even a hello. The question threw me off. "Yes, Patricia, I'm alone." "Why? Is something wrong?" There was a strange silence, long, uncomfortable. Then I heard voices behind her, murmurs I couldn't make out. "No, nothing's wrong. Just wanted to see how you were. Good night." And she hung up. It was so abrupt, so strange, that I stared at the phone for several minutes, trying to understand. I thought maybe she was busy, that I had caught her at a bad time. But the next day, at the exact same time, she called again. And she asked me the same question. "Mom, are you alone?" This time, I answered differently. "No, Patricia. My neighbor Rosa is here having coffee with me." It was a lie. Rosa wasn't there, but something in me felt the need to lie, to not admit my loneliness. Patricia's reaction was immediate. "Rosa? What's Rosa doing there at this hour? Is she going to stay long? Is she sleeping over?" The intensity of her questions made me uncomfortable. "No, she just brought over some cookies. She's leaving in a little while." Another silence. "Ah, well. Call me when she leaves, okay? I want to talk to you about something important." And she hung up. I didn't call her back, and she didn't call again that night. But the next day, at 9:15 exactly, the phone rang again, and so began a pattern that would repeat every night for the next 3 months. Every night, without fail, Patricia called. And every night, she asked me the same question. "Mom, are you alone?" I started to experiment. Some nights I'd say yes, that I was alone. Then she would hang up immediately, no more words, not even a goodbye. Other nights I'd lie, say I had company, that someone was with me. In those cases, Patricia would insist. She wanted to know who it was, how long they were staying, if they were sleeping at my house, if they would be back the next day. Her questions became more and more specific, more invasive, more disturbing. I started to feel scared. A dull, deep fear that I couldn't explain to anyone because it sounded ridiculous. How do you tell someone that your daughter-in-law calls every night to ask if you're alone, and that it terrifies you? It sounds like the rambling of a crazy old woman, a lonely woman with too much time to imagine conspiracies. But there was more. Little things I started to notice. The lock on the back door was tampered with one morning. I thought it had been an attempted robbery, but nothing was missing from the house. Nothing was out of place. One night, I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked through the window and saw a figure moving away through the trees. I called the police, but when they arrived, they didn't find anyone. They told me it was probably an animal, a deer, or a stray dog. I started sleeping badly. Every noise woke me up. The wind, moving the branches against the window, sounded like fingers scratching the glass. The creaking of the house's old wood sounded like footsteps. And every night, at 9:15, the phone rang. And it was Patricia. Always Patricia. 2 weeks ago, I tried to talk to Victor. I called him one morning, early, before he left for work. "Son, I need to talk to you about Patricia." "What's wrong, Mom? Did you two have a fight?" "No, it's not that. She calls me every night and asks if I'm alone, and I don't understand why." Victor laughed. He laughed. "Oh, Mom, Patricia's just worried about you. It's normal. You live alone, you're getting older. She just wants to make sure you're okay." "But, son," it's the way she asks. The insistence. "Mom, I think you're exaggerating. Patricia loves you a lot. She's just being careful. You should thank her instead of being suspicious." I felt foolish. I felt guilty. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe the loneliness was making me paranoid. Maybe Patricia was just a worried daughter-in-law, and I was an ungrateful old woman, incapable of appreciating her concern. But then, 3 nights ago, something changed. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I saw a car parked at the end of the driveway, through the window. It wasn't a car I recognized. It was off, no lights, barely visible in the dim twilight. And there was someone inside. I could see the silhouette, motionless, watching my house. My heart started to beat faster. I turned off the kitchen lights and kept watching from the window, hidden behind the curtain. The car stayed there for almost 20 minutes, motionless, silent, threatening. Then, without turning on the headlights, it started up and drove slowly down the dirt road, disappearing into the trees. That night, when Patricia called at 9:15, my voice was trembling when I answered. "Mom, are you alone?" For the first time in weeks, I told her the truth without thinking. "Yes, Patricia, I'm alone." There was a pause longer than usual. And then I heard something I had never heard before in our calls, a laugh. Brief, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a laugh that chilled my blood. "Perfect. Rest well, Mom." And she hung up. That word. Perfect. Why was it perfect that I was alone? What did that mean? I sat on the living room sofa, the phone still in my hand, feeling the fear turn into panic. Something was very wrong. Something terrible was happening. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt it in every fiber of my body. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake in the living room, with all the lights on, looking out the window every few minutes. Every shadow seemed like a threat. Every sound made me jump. At 3 a.m, I heard a noise at the back of the house. A metallic thud, as if someone had bumped into the fence. I froze, holding my breath, waiting to hear something else. But there was only silence. At dawn, I went out to check. The shed door was open. I was sure I had locked it with the padlock the night before. I always do, every single night. But there it was, open, swinging gently in the morning breeze. Inside, everything seemed normal. The gardening tools, the old boxes, the furniture I didn't use anymore. But something was different. The dust on the floor showed footprints, boot prints, large, recent. Someone had been in there. I called Rosa, my neighbor. Rosa is 62 years old. She's a widow like me, and we've lived near each other for over 30 years. She's the only person I really trust. I told her everything. The calls, the car, the footprints, my suspicion about Patricia. I expected her to tell me I was crazy, that I was imagining things. But she didn't. "Sonia, I've noticed strange things too," she said, as we had coffee in my kitchen. 2 weeks ago, I saw a car driving around here, going down the road, coming back, like they were casing the place. And last week, when I went to town, I heard two men in the hardware store talking about your house. They were saying something about properties and inheritances. When they saw me, they shut up. Her words confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. But what did they want? What were they looking for? My house is old. The property is worth something, but it's not a fortune. I live on my pension and the savings my husband left. I'm not rich. I have nothing that would justify this kind of harassment. You have to get help, Rosa told me. This isn't normal. Go to the police, talk to a lawyer. Do something before it's too late. That same day, I went to town. But I didn't go to the police. Something told me I needed to understand what was happening first, before getting the authorities involved. Instead, I went to see Daniel Mendoza, a lawyer who had helped my husband with some paperwork years ago. His office is on Main Street, right above the pharmacy, a modest place with books stacked to the ceiling and the smell of old paper. Daniel is about 50 years old, gray hair at the temples, round glasses that give him the air of a distracted professor. When I told him my situation, his expression changed. He became serious, very serious. Sonia, I need to ask you something important. Did your husband ever talk to you about his businesses? About partnerships, investments, properties beyond this house? The question surprised me. No. Daniel, my husband was a farmer. We had this house, the land, the orange trees, nothing else. Daniel took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Sonia, I handled some documents for your husband many years ago. Documents he asked me to keep secret, not to mention to anyone, not even you. He made me swear I would only reveal them if something happened to him and you were in danger. My heart stopped. What documents? Your husband was a partner in several properties with Patricia's father. Land up north, near the coast. When those investments were made, about 30 years ago, that land was worth almost nothing. It was arid land, no commercial value. But 5 years ago, just before your husband died, the government announced a big tourist development project in that area. That land is now worth millions of dollars. Sonia, millions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, my simple, honest husband, the owner of million-dollar properties? Why did he never tell me? Why did he keep it a secret? There's more, Daniel continued, opening a file cabinet and pulling out a thick folder. Patricia's father died 4 years ago, right? I nodded. I remembered the funeral. Patricia had cried a lot. Victor had been very serious, worried about his wife. When he died, he left behind enormous debts. He had mortgaged everything, taken out loans using the properties as collateral. But here's the detail. The properties were never really in his name. They were in your husband's name, Sonia. Your husband was the majority partner. Patricia's father only owned 30%. And when your husband died, that 70% automatically passed to you. The room started to spin. But I never knew anything about this. I never signed anything, ever. You didn't have to sign anything. It was in your husband's will, legally registered. You are the owner, Sonia. And those properties, according to the latest appraisals I got, are worth approximately $8 million. $8 million. The figure was so absurd, so impossible, I couldn't process it. Me, who lived on a $400 a month pension, who counted every penny at the supermarket, was a millionaire? Patricia knows, I said quietly, suddenly understanding. She knows about the properties. Daniel nodded gravely. Yes. And her father's debts fell on her and Victor when he died. They are drowning in debt, Sonia. They owe more than $2 million to banks and private lenders. If they don't pay soon, they lose everything. But if you were to die, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If I died, Victor would inherit everything. The properties, the millions of dollars, the solution to all their problems. And Patricia knew it. Patricia had been calling me every night. Not out of concern, not out of love, but to know when I was alone, when it was the perfect time for something to happen to me. An accident, a robbery gone wrong. An old woman who dies alone in her house and nobody suspects a thing. Daniel, I'm scared, I told him. And my voice broke. My own daughter-in-law wants me dead. He reached his hand across the desk and touched mine gently. Sonia, we need to act fast. I'm going to prepare documents. I'm going to protect your rights legally. But you must be very careful. You can't tell Victor any of this. Not yet. We don't know how much he knows, if he's involved, or if Patricia is manipulating him. Those words hurt me more than anything else. My son. My only son. Was it possible he knew? That he was okay with this? I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Victor was a good man, a little weak perhaps, too easily influenced, but not a murderer. He couldn't do it. I left Daniel's office feeling like the world had turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My marriage had held secrets I never imagined. My family was broken in ways I couldn't comprehend. And my life was in real, not imagined, danger. I drove back home in a daze. The familiar landscape, the mountains I had seen for 40 years, the cornfields, the eucalyptus trees, everything looked different now, threatening, as if the whole world was conspiring against me. When I reached my driveway, I saw another car parked. This time it wasn't hidden at the end of the road. It was right in front of my house, and I recognized that car. It was Patricia and Victor's. Panic flooded me. I wasn't ready to face them, not knowing what I now knew, but I couldn't turn around and flee. That would be suspicious. I took a deep breath and parked my old truck next to their car. Patricia came out of the house. She had a key. I had given her 1 year ago, when things were different, when I believed she was real family. Now that key felt like a threat, like an invasion. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here," she said with a smile that could no longer fool me. "We were worried. We called you several times and you didn't answer." I touched my purse and realized I had silenced my phone after leaving Daniel's office. I went to town to run some errands. "What are you two doing here?" Victor appeared behind Patricia. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, older than I remembered. It had been almost 2 months since I'd seen him in person. "Mom, we need to talk to you. It's important." We went into the house. Patricia moved around my kitchen as if it were hers, making coffee, getting out cups, arranging cookies on a plate. Every one of her movements irritated me now. Victor sat at the table, and I sat across from him, trying to keep my face neutral, not to reveal the terror I felt. "Mom, we're in trouble," Victor began, and for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. Very serious trouble. When Patricia's dad died, we inherited debts we didn't know existed. Huge debts. We've tried to pay them. We've sold everything we could sell, but it's not enough. They're going to take our house, our business, everything. Patricia put her hand on Victor's shoulder, a gesture that seemed supportive but which I now saw as possessive, controlling. "Mom, we know this is a difficult request, but we need your help. We know you have this property, that it's worth something. If you could sell it, or take out a mortgage, or—" "How much do you need?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though I was shaking inside. Victor looked at Patricia before answering. $200,000. With that, we could settle the most urgent things, buy us some time to reorganize. $200,000. A fraction of what the properties I didn't know I had were really worth. They didn't know that I knew. They thought they could trick me, manipulate me, make me believe they just needed help, when in reality, they wanted everything. "I don't have that kind of money," I said. "This house is all I have, and it's my home. I can't sell it. I have nowhere else to go." Patricia's lips tightened. I saw a flash of rage in her eyes before she could hide it. "Mom, I understand it's your home, but Victor is your son, your only son. Wouldn't you want to help him in such a difficult time? You could come live with us. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Live with them, under their control, completely vulnerable." "Let me think about it," I said. "It's a very big decision. I need time." "We don't have much time, Mom," Victor said, and there was real desperation in his voice. "The banks are pressuring us. We have until the end of the month." The end of the month. That was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks for me to decide to sell my house, or 2 weeks for them to find another solution. A permanent solution. They stayed for another hour, insisting, arguing, trying to convince me. Patricia was more aggressive, Victor more emotional. I realized something watching them. Victor didn't really know. He didn't know about the million-dollar properties. He didn't know about Patricia's plan. He genuinely believed they were just asking his mother for help to get out of a financial bind. It was Patricia who knew everything. Patricia who had orchestrated all of this. When they finally left, I sat in the living room, trembling. The sun was setting, filling the house with that golden, melancholic afternoon light. This house my husband built, where we raised our son, where I was happy for so many years, now felt like a prison, or worse, like a tomb in waiting. I called Rosa. I told her everything, every detail of what Daniel had revealed about Patricia and Victor's visit. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she just said, "I'm staying with you tonight. You're not going to be alone." Rosa arrived with a small bag before it got dark. We made dinner together, trying to maintain some semblance of normality, but we were both tense, waiting. At 9:15 exactly, the phone rang. "Don't answer it," Rosa said. But something in me needed to answer. I needed to hear her voice, to confirm my suspicions. I answered, "Mom, are you alone?" This time, with Rosa sitting across from me, with everything I now knew, my answer was different. "No, Patricia, my friend Rosa is here with me. She's going to spend the night." There was a long silence, so long I thought she had hung up. But then she spoke, and her voice was different. Cold, without pretense. "What a shame. Good night, Mom." And she hung up. Rosa and I looked at each other. "That was a threat," she said. "What a shame you're not alone." That's what she meant. We stayed up all night, taking turns keeping watch. At 2 a.m, we heard the car. The headlights went out before it reached the house. Rosa called the police immediately, while I watched from the window. 2 figures got out of the car. One was tall, bulky. The other was smaller but moved with determination. They approached the house, tried the back door, checked the windows. The police sirens wailed in the distance. The figures ran back to the car and took off at full speed, kicking up dust on the road. When the police arrived, the car was already gone. The officer who arrived that night was named Martin Reyes. He was a man in his 40s, with a serious, professional look that gave me some peace of mind. We told him everything: the nightly calls, the car watching the house, the footprints in the shed, and finally, the 2 intruders who had just fled. He took meticulous notes, checked the area around the house with his flashlight, and photographed the tire tracks on the road. "Mrs. Sonia, this is serious," he said when we were back inside. "I don't want to alarm you more than necessary, but this has all the hallmarks of a premeditated stalking case. Do you have any idea who might want to harm you? Enemies? Conflicts with neighbors? Inheritance problems?" I looked at Rosa. She nodded slightly, encouraging me to speak. "Officer, I think it's my daughter-in-law, Patricia. She and my son are in financial trouble, and I have properties they need. I didn't tell him everything about the millions of dollars. Something told me to keep that information private until I was completely sure how to proceed. But I gave him enough details to understand the gravity of the situation." Officer Martin grew thoughtful. "Is your son involved?" "I don't know," I admitted, and saying those words out loud hurt me deeply. I want to believe he's not, that he doesn't know what his wife is planning, but I'm not sure of anything anymore. "I'm going to increase patrols in this area," Martin said, "and I strongly recommend you consider staying with someone for a few days until we can investigate further. I'll also need you to come to the station tomorrow to file a formal report." After he left, Rosa and I sat in the living room, exhausted but too riled up to sleep. "You should come to my house," Rosa told me. "At least for tonight." But something stubborn in me refused. "This is my house, Rosa. I'm not going to let them chase me out of my own home. They've already taken too much." The next morning, early, I went to Daniel's office. I told him about the events of the previous night. His face turned pale. "Sonia, this is getting out of control very fast. We need to act now. I'm going to do something you might not like, but it's necessary. I'm going to contact Victor directly. Without Patricia, we need to know how much he knows. And what if he is involved? If you tell him everything and it makes him react, it's a risk we have to take. Because if Victor is innocent, he's our best chance to stop Patricia before it's too late. And if he's not, well, then at least we'll know the truth." Daniel called Victor from his office. He put it on speakerphone so I could hear. My son answered on the third ring. Victor? This is Daniel Mendoza, your mother's attorney. There was a confused pause. My mother's attorney? Did something happen? I need to see you today. Urgently. You alone. It's about your father's inheritance and properties your mother just discovered she owns. Properties worth several $1,000,000. The silence that followed was long, too long. When Victor finally spoke, his voice was trembling. What are you talking about? My father was a farmer. There were no millions of dollars. Your mother is here with me. Come to my office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You alone, Victor. This is critical. Victor arrived at exactly 3. When he walked in and saw me, his face showed confusion, worry, fear. Daniel closed the door, and for the next hour, he explained everything. The land, the partnership with Patricia's father, the current value of the properties, the debts, the inheritance. Victor listened with widening eyes, his mouth half open, as if he were taking blow after blow. It can't be, he muttered several times. Patricia never told me any of this. She just told me we needed to convince Mom to help us with the house, that if she sold her property, we could be saved. Convince? I asked, my voice harder than I intended. Or eliminate? Victor looked at me with genuine horror. What? Mom. No. Never. I would never. How could you think that? Someone has been watching my house, Victor. Someone tried to break in last night, and Patricia calls me every night to find out if I'm alone. What am I supposed to think? I watched as understanding flooded his face. I saw how all the pieces clicked into place in his mind, how the small details he had probably ignored or justified now took on a sinister meaning. The men, he said in a low voice. 2 weeks ago, Patricia hired 2 men. She told me they were to remodel the office, but I never saw any remodeling. And the calls. She always disappeared at 9 o'clock at night. She said it was to call you, to check on you. I thought it was sweet that she was being a good daughter-in-law. Who are these men? Daniel asked urgently. I don't know. She never formally introduced me. I only saw them once, talking to Patricia in the parking lot. Rough guys, looked like, I don't know, guys who do dirty work. My son covered his face with his hands. My God, my wife is trying to kill my mother. How did we get to this? How did I not see it? Because she's manipulative, I said, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity for my son, and because you wanted to believe her. We all want to believe in the people we love. Daniel leaned forward. Victor, I need you to understand something very important. Your mother is in real danger. Patricia has motive, means, and apparently intent. We need concrete evidence to stop her. Are you willing to help us? Victor nodded without hesitation. Whatever it takes. She's my mother. I'm not going to let anyone hurt her. Over the next few hours, we developed a plan. Victor would return home and act as if nothing had happened. He would try to get information on the 2 men Patricia had hired, names, phone numbers, anything that would help us identify them. Meanwhile, Officer Martin, whom Daniel had contacted, would work with us to set a trap. Tonight, when Patricia calls, Daniel explained, you're going to tell her you're alone, completely alone. That Rosa left, that she's not coming back. You're going to make it sound convincing, and we'll be waiting. The idea terrified me, but it was the only way. We needed to catch Patricia in the act, with irrefutable evidence. What if something goes wrong? I asked. Officer Martin, who had joined us in the office, spoke firmly. I'll be there with 3 other officers. We'll be hidden around your property. We are not going to let anything happen to you, Mrs. Sonia. I promise. That afternoon, I returned home. Rosa was there, waiting anxiously. I told her the plan. She insisted on staying, hiding in the attic if necessary. But the officers told her it was better for her to leave visibly, that Patricia needed to truly believe I was alone. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Rosa left my house making a lot of noise, saying goodbye loudly, making sure anyone watching would see her leave. The officers arrived shortly after, in unmarked cars, parking far from the property and approaching on foot. They positioned themselves in the barn, behind the orange trees, inside the shed. The house was surrounded. I stayed inside, waiting. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. I tried to read a book, but the words made no sense. At 8:30, Victor called me on his personal phone. "Mom, Patricia just left. She said she was going to see a friend, but I heard her call someone before she left. I couldn't hear everything, but she mentioned your address. And Mom? She had a suitcase in the car, as if she wasn't planning on coming back tonight." My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. "It's okay, son. Everything is going to be all right. Be careful, please." "I love you, Mom. I love you too." At 9:15 exactly, the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before answering, trying to control my breathing, to make my voice sound normal, unsuspecting, just like all the other nights. "Hello. Mom, are you alone?" Patricia's voice sounded different this time. There was an urgency in it, a tension I had never heard before. "Yes, Patricia, I'm alone. Rosa left a few hours ago. She got tired of being here so long. Said she needed to get back to her own house." I paused, as if I was about to add something else, and then let out a fake sigh of exhaustion. Honestly, I need to be alone for a while too. These have been very heavy days. There was a silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Heavy days? Why?" "This whole situation with you two, with the money. I've been thinking a lot. I think I'm going to sell the house, Patricia. I think you're right, that I should help my son. Tomorrow, I'm going to the bank to see what my options are." Another pause. That's wonderful, Mom. Victor is going to be so relieved. We're all going to be better." "Yes," I said, feeling the tears threatening to fall. Not because of the lie I was telling, but because of the confirmation that everything I suspected was true. Patricia sounded relieved because she thought I was going to solve her problem voluntarily, which meant the alternative plan, the violent plan, could be called off. "Well, I'm going to bed now. I'm very tired." "Rest well, Mom. Have sweet dreams." The way she said those last words chilled my blood. There was something final about them, something that sounded like a permanent goodbye. I hung up the phone and sat on the living room sofa, with all the lights on. Officer Martin had instructed me to act normally, to go about my usual routine. So, I turned off the living room lights, leaving only the porch light on, as I did every night. I went up to my bedroom, turned on the bedside lamp, and waited. From my window, I could see part of the driveway. The moon was almost full, illuminating the landscape with that silvery, ghostly light that makes everything look unreal. The orange trees cast long, distorted shadows. The wind rustled the branches gently, creating a constant whisper that set my nerves on edge. An hour passed, then another. It was almost 11:30 when I saw the lights. A car was coming down the road, very slowly, with its headlights off. It stopped just before reaching the house, where the road curves and the trees are densest. From that position, the car wasn't visible from the house, but I could see it from my second-floor window. 3 figures got out of the car. One of them was clearly Patricia. I recognized her silhouette, the way she moved. The other 2 were large, bulky men. One of them was carrying something in his hand that shined briefly in the moonlight. A gun. He had a gun. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they could hear it from downstairs. I wanted to run, to scream, to do something. But I knew I had to stay still, that I had to let them get close enough for the officers to catch them with clear evidence of their intentions. I watched them approach the house slowly, moving between the shadows like predators. Patricia was in the lead, guiding them. They stopped by the back door, the same one I had found tampered with weeks ago. One of the men took something from his pocket, probably tools to pick the lock. Patricia whispered instructions that I couldn't hear from my position. And then, so fast I could barely process it, the yard lights all turned on at the same time, bright and intense, as if it were day. "Police! Hands up! Don't move!" Officer Martin's voice echoed across the yard, amplified by a bullhorn. I saw Patricia freeze. I saw the 2 men react differently. One raised his hands immediately, the other tried to run. But the officers were everywhere. They emerged from the barn, from behind the orange trees, from the shed. In seconds, all 3 were on the ground, handcuffed, as the officers read them their rights. I ran down the stairs, my body trembling with adrenaline and relief. When I stepped out into the yard, I saw Patricia on the ground, her clothes covered in dirt, her hair disheveled, but what struck me most was her face. There was no regret in it, no shame, just rage, pure, venomous rage. "This is a mistake," she screamed. "We weren't doing anything. We were just coming to visit my mother-in-law." At 11:30 at night, with 2 armed men, picking the back lock, Officer Martin said dryly, "Sure, a very normal visit." One of the men, the one who had tried to run, started talking immediately. "I didn't sign up for this. She hired us, told us it was a simple job, scare an old lady into selling her house. She paid us $5,000 up front, promised another $10,000 when we were done. But this is attempted murder. I don't kill anyone. I didn't." "Shut up, you idiot!" Patricia screamed. But it was too late. The man was talking, spilling everything, desperate to reduce his own sentence. The other man, the larger one who'd had the gun, remained silent. But when they searched his backpack, they found more than just the gun. There were gloves, rags, and a bottle of what looked like an accelerant. Officer Martin looked at me gravely. "Mrs. Sonia, it looks like the plan wasn't just to assault you. They were going to burn the house, with you inside, make it look like an accident." My legs gave out. If an officer hadn't caught me, I would have fallen. Burn the house, with me inside, turn everything to ash, eliminate evidence, make it look like a tragic accident, an old woman who fell asleep with a candle burning or something. And Patricia would have cried at the funeral, would have comforted Victor, and would have inherited millions of dollars. "You can't prove anything," Patricia said, her voice now cold and calculating. "These men are lying. I just came to talk to my mother-in-law. I don't know anything about guns or fire. They acted on their own." But then Officer Martin smiled. He took a small device from his pocket. "Mrs. Patricia, remember the phone call you made 2 hours ago? The one we got a warrant to record, where you tell your mother-in-law to have sweet dreams. And then 3 minutes later, you call this number." He pointed to one of the handcuffed men. "And you say, and I quote, 'She's alone. She's tired. She's going to sleep soon. It's the perfect time. Remember, it has to look like an accident. No evidence.' Does that sound familiar?" I watched the color drain from Patricia's face. I saw all her composure, all her arrogance, crumble in a second. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out. "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Martin began, as he lifted her from the ground. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." They took them all away, Patricia screaming, threatening, swearing this wasn't over. The 2 men silent, defeated. When the patrol cars drove away, sirens blaring, I stayed in the yard, trembling under the bright light that now seemed too intense, too exposed. Rosa appeared from nowhere, running down the road. "Sonia, I saw the lights, the sirens. Are you okay?" She hugged me. And finally, after weeks of holding in all the fear, all the tension, all the betrayal, I broke down. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried for the family I thought I had, which turned out to be a lie. I cried for my son, who had been deceived by the woman he loved. I cried for my husband, who had kept secrets trying to protect me and, in the process, had put me in danger. I cried for myself, for the innocence lost, for the trust destroyed. Victor arrived half an hour later, driving like a madman from the city. When he saw me, he knelt in front of me, sobbing. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." I hugged him, this son of mine, who had been so weak, so blind, but who, in the end, had chosen to do the right thing. "It's not your fault, son. She fooled us all. What's going to happen now?" he asked in a broken voice. "Now," said Officer Martin, who had stayed behind to take my official statement, "your wife is going to face charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, and several other charges. The 2 men will probably testify against her in exchange for reduced sentences. She is going to prison for a very, very long time." Victor nodded, wiping his tears. "Good. Let her go. Let her pay for what she tried to do." The days that followed were a strange mixture of relief and pain. Relief because the immediate danger was over, because Patricia was behind bars with no chance of bail. But pain because every day brought new revelations, new layers of betrayal that made everything more complicated, darker. Daniel worked tirelessly, investigating the documents my husband had left. It turned out the properties weren't the only thing he had hidden. There were bank accounts overseas, investments in companies I never knew existed, a whole financial legacy he never told me about. When Daniel finally showed me the total value of everything, I almost fainted. $11 million. $11 million that had been there the whole time while I was counting pennies at the supermarket. Why? I asked Daniel one afternoon in his office, looking at the papers that documented a whole secret life of my husband. Why did he never tell me? Didn't he trust me? Daniel sighed, taking off his glasses to clean them. A gesture I had learned meant he was about to say something difficult. Sonia, I found a letter. Your husband wrote it 6 years ago, just after his diagnosis. Diagnosis? What diagnosis? Your husband had a serious heart condition. The doctors gave him between 5 and 10 years to live. He knew, Sonia. He knew he was dying. The words hit me like stones. My husband knew he was dying and never told me. He never gave me the chance to say goodbye properly, to cherish every moment together, knowing that time was limited. Daniel handed me a yellowish envelope. The letter is for you. He asked me to give it to you only if you were ever in danger related to the money. I think this is the time. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. My husband's handwriting, firm and clear, filled 2 pages. I started to read, and the tears began to fall before I finished the first paragraph. My dearest Sonia, if you are reading this, it means my worst fears came true. It means someone discovered the money and put you in danger. And it means I wasn't there to protect you. Forgive me. I kept this secret from you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you. When I made those investments with Patricia's father 30 years ago, they were legitimate businesses, but he was involved with dangerous people, loan sharks, criminals. I didn't know until it was too late. When I tried to get out of the business, they threatened me. They told me if I talked, if I involved the authorities, they would hurt you and Victor. So I kept the secret. I kept everything separate from our family life. The money grew, the properties increased in value, but I could never enjoy it because every penny was stained with that fear. When the doctors told me I didn't have much time left, I took precautions. I hired Daniel, prepared documents, and secured everything legally so that when I died, you would be protected. But I knew Patricia's father was a man without scruples. I knew that when he died, his debts and problems would fall on his family, and I feared they would try to get to you, to our money. That's why I put everything in your name, not Victor's. Because if something happened to me, I didn't want our son to be dragged into that dark world. Sonia, you are the strongest woman I know. If you are reading this, it means you survived, that you fought, that you didn't let them beat you. Forgive me for leaving you alone with this burden. Forgive me for not trusting that we could face it together. But please, understand that every decision I made was to keep you safe. The money is yours now. Use it as you wish. Enjoy it. Live the life you deserve. And if our son is there with you, help him, but do it wisely. Teach him that real family is built on honesty, not secrets. I have loved you since the first day I saw you, and I will keep loving you wherever I am now. Take care, my love, and be happy. Yours forever, Richard. I cried so hard that Daniel had to bring me a glass of water. I cried for the man I loved, who had carried such a terrible burden alone to protect me. I cried for the years we lost, for the conversations we never had, for the trust that could have been, but never was. And I cried for the love in that letter, a love so deep it sacrificed itself trying to keep me safe. He did everything wrong trying to do the right thing, I finally said, drying my tears. But he did it for love. Yes, Daniel agreed. And now you have to decide what to do with all this. Over the next few weeks, as the trial against Patricia was prepared, I had to make many difficult decisions. The first and most painful was about Victor. He had lost everything. His wife was in prison, his house was foreclosed on by the banks due to the debts, his business had collapsed. He came to see me one afternoon, shattered, asking for help. Mom, I have nothing. I have nowhere to live, no job. Everything is gone. And the worst part is, half the town looks at me like I was an accomplice in what Patricia tried to do to you. My heart broke seeing him like that. He was my son, my only son, and seeing him so destroyed hurt me deeply. But I had also learned something in these months. That love doesn't mean letting people escape the consequences of their actions, even when those consequences are painful. Victor, I'm going to help you, I told him. But not in the way you expect. I'm not going to pay off your debts. I'm not going to buy you a new house or give you money to start another business. Do you know why? He looked at me with confusion and pain. Why? Because that's exactly what your father did wrong. He solved all his problems alone, kept all his secrets. He never taught us to face difficulties together. And look where that got us. You need to learn to solve your own problems, to be strong on your own. But Mom, I have no way to start over. I have nothing. You have more than you think. You have intelligence, you have your health, you still have your youth. You have the chance to rebuild your life the right way this time. I will be here to support you emotionally. You can live here with me while you find a job and save up. I will give you food and shelter. But the rest, son, you have to earn it yourself. I saw tears in his eyes, but also something else. Understanding. He nodded slowly. You're right. I've always been weak. I've always let others make decisions for me. First Dad, then Patricia, always looking for the easy way out. It's time to change that. Exactly. And I'll be here to watch you grow, to watch you become the man I know you can be. Victor moved into the house that same week. At first, it was awkward, even painful. He slept in his old room, the one that hadn't changed since he was a teenager, surrounded by soccer trophies and faded posters. Every morning, he got up early, looked for work, filled out applications. At first, he got nothing. The scandal with Patricia had stained his reputation in town. But slowly, things began to change. He got a job on a farm outside of town, hard, manual labor he had never done before. He would come home exhausted, his hands blistered, but there was something different in his eyes. There was pride. He was earning his own money, building his own life. Patricia's trial began 3 months after her arrest. I had to testify, to relive all the terror of those weeks. Patricia watched me from the defendant's table with cold eyes, no visible remorse. Her lawyer tried to argue it had all been a misunderstanding, that she only wanted to scare me into selling the house, never to actually hurt me. But the evidence was overwhelming. The phone recordings, the testimony from the 2 men she had hired, the text messages they had recovered from her phone where she explicitly discussed how to make my death look like an accident. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty of attempted first-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, and solicitation of murder. The judge, a woman in her 60s with stern but fair eyes, sentenced her to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. When I heard the sentence, I didn't feel the triumph I expected to feel. There was no joy in that moment, just a profound exhaustion, an emptiness where the fear used to be. I looked at Patricia as the officers handcuffed her to take her back to prison. For a moment, our eyes met, and in that instant, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not the arrogant fear of someone facing temporary consequences, but the real fear of someone who finally understands that their life, as they knew it, is over forever. I didn't feel pity for her. I felt something more complex, something I can't describe with simple words. A mixture of relief, sadness, and a strange kind of liberation. This woman had tried to kill me, had manipulated my son, had destroyed our family. But seeing her like this, defeated, didn't give me the satisfaction I thought I would get. It just reminded me how fragile people are, how quickly we can fall when we let greed and desperation dictate our actions. Victor didn't come to the trial. He couldn't. He told me he didn't have the courage to see her, to hear the details of how she had planned my death. I understood. Sometimes love, even broken and betrayed love, needs time to turn into something else. It needs space to heal. That night, after the verdict, Victor and I sat on the porch of the house, watching the sunset over the orange trees. The air smelled of blossoms, that sweet, clean scent that had always seemed to me like the smell of hope. We were silent for a long time, each lost in our own thoughts. "Mom," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "are you ever going to be able to forgive me?" The question surprised me. Forgive you for what, son? For being so blind. For bringing that woman into our lives. For not protecting you when I should have. I took a moment before answering. Victor, you weren't the one who tried to kill me. You were deceived, manipulated. Patricia was an expert at making people see only what she wanted them to see. But when it came time to choose, when you knew the truth, you chose correctly. You chose your mother. You chose to do the right thing, even when it meant betraying the woman you loved. That takes a courage I didn't know you had. He wiped the tears rolling down his cheeks. I don't feel brave. I feel like an idiot. Sometimes being brave starts with feeling like an idiot, I said, and despite everything, we both laughed a little. It was the first genuine laugh we had shared in months, and it sounded like music. The following months brought more changes. With Daniel's help, I began to organize my new financial situation. $11 million is a life-changing amount of money, one that opens doors I never imagined possible. But it also brings responsibilities and difficult decisions. I decided to sell the properties up north. That land stained with the dark past of my husband and Patricia's father. I wanted nothing to do with that world, with those stories of debt and criminals. I sold them for $9 million to a tourist development company. With that money, after paying all the taxes and legal fees, I was left with approximately $7 million. Then came the most important decision. What to do with that money? Part of me wanted to just save it, to live modestly as I always had, to let it accumulate for future generations. But another part, the part that had grown through all this trauma, knew that money saved and unused is like a life unlived. I was 70 years old. How much time did I have left? Was I going to spend my last years counting millions I never enjoyed? I hired a financial manager, a serious man recommended by Daniel. Together, we developed a plan. $2 million was put into conservative investments that would give me a comfortable monthly income for the rest of my life. $500,000 I put into a trust fund for Victor, money he could only access gradually, by demonstrating financial responsibility over time. I didn't want to give it to him all at once and risk him wasting it. But it was with the other $4.5 million that I did something that changed not only my life, but the lives of many others. Rosa and I were having coffee one morning when the idea struck me. She was telling me about a neighbor whose husband had died, leaving her with no pension, no savings, struggling to survive on sporadic help from her children, who were also struggling. There are so many women like that, Rosa said sadly. Women who dedicated their lives to caring for their families, who never worked formally, who are now old and alone and without resources. The system forgot them. And that's when clarity hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had been one of those women. If it weren't for my husband's secret, for that money I never knew existed, I would be struggling too, living on $400 a month, counting pennies, depending on my son's charity. I had been saved by pure luck, or by the secret planning of a dead man. But how many other women didn't have that luck? Rosa, I said, feeling the idea take shape in my mind, what if we used the money to help them? What if we created something? A foundation, a program, something to help older women in vulnerable situations? Rosa's eyes lit up. Sonia, that would be wonderful. But are you serious? Would you really do that? More than serious. I'm dead serious. For the next 6 months, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. With Daniel's help, we established the Richard and Sonia Foundation, named in honor of my husband and as an attempt to redeem the money he had earned in such complicated circumstances. The mission was simple: to provide financial assistance, safe housing, and community support to women over 60 years old who were facing economic hardship. We bought an old building downtown, a former school that had been abandoned for years. With $1 million, we renovated it completely, turning it into small but dignified apartments with common areas, a shared kitchen, gardens, and spaces for activities. It wasn't a nursing home. It wasn't humiliating charity. It was a home, a place where women who had lost their security could rebuild their lives with dignity. The first 10 women moved in 6 months after we opened. One of them was Rosa's neighbor, the widow with no pension. Another was a woman who had been evicted from her home when she couldn't pay the mortgage after her husband's death. Another had been kicked out of her son's house by her abusive daughter-in-law. Each one had a story of pain, of abandonment, of struggle. But in that building, surrounded by other women who understood, who had survived, who supported each other, they began to flourish again. I saw women in their 70s and 80s learning new skills, making new friends, laughing in ways they probably hadn't laughed in years. Victor was essential in making all of this work. He left his job at the farm and became the foundation's administrator. He discovered he had a talent for organization, for dealing with the authorities, for solving practical problems. I watched him grow into that role, saw his confidence return, but this time it was based on real achievements, not on easy money or quick schemes. One afternoon, almost a year after Patricia's trial, I was in the foundation's gardens helping to plant roses when one of the residents approached me. Her name was Teresa. She was 75 years old, and she had come to us after her children abandoned her in a homeless shelter. "Sonia," she said, taking my hands in her wrinkled ones, marked by a lifetime of hard work, "I want you to know that you saved my life. You didn't just save it, you made it worth living again. I had lost all hope. I thought the only thing left for me was to wait to die. But here, with these women, in this place, I feel like I've been born again." Her words made me cry, but they were different tears from all the ones I had shed in the last year. They were tears of meaning, of purpose, of knowing that something good, something real and beautiful, had emerged from all the darkness. 2 years passed since that night I lied on the phone, and that lie saved my life. 2 years in which everything changed in ways I could never have imagined. The foundation grew beyond my wildest dreams. It was no longer just 10 women, but 42, spread across 3 different buildings we had acquired and renovated. Each building was a small universe of survival stories, of women who had been invisible to the world and who now had a voice, a community, and dignity. Victor had completely transformed. The weak, manipulable man he had been no longer existed. In his place was someone with purpose, with moral strength, with a deep understanding of what really matters in life. He had started a relationship with Carmen, a social worker who collaborated with the foundation. She was the complete opposite of Patricia. Honest, transparent, genuinely kind. Seeing them together filled me with hope, with the certainty that my son had finally learned to recognize true love. Rosa had become more than my neighbor or my friend. She was my sister in everything but blood. Together, we managed the foundation, visited the residents, and organized activities. We discovered we had a natural talent for creating community, for making women who had been strangers become family. But there was one shadow that still lingered, one piece of unfinished business I hadn't been able to resolve. Patricia. Since her imprisonment, I had had no contact with her. I hadn't wanted any. The anger, though it had faded with time, was still there when I thought of her, of what she had tried to do to me, of how she had destroyed so many lives chasing money. One spring day, 2 years and 3 months after the trial, I received a letter. The return address was the state penitentiary for women. It was from Patricia. My first instinct was to tear it up without reading it. But something stopped me. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the feeling that I needed some kind of closure. I opened it. The letter was long, written in small, trembling handwriting on both sides of several sheets of thin prison paper. It began with the words I least expected. "Dear Sonia, I do not expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth." I read the entire letter standing in my kitchen, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, illuminating the words Patricia had written. And as I read, something inside me began to shift. Patricia told her story, not as an excuse, but as an explanation. She had grown up in extreme poverty. Her father, the man who had been my husband's partner, had physically and emotionally abused her throughout her childhood. Money, to him, was the only thing that mattered, the only thing that gave people value. He taught her that survival required ruthless ambition, that kindness was weakness, that the world was a place where you either eat or are eaten. When her father died and she discovered the monumental debts he had left, she panicked. It wasn't just the money, she wrote. It was the terror of being poor again, of being that helpless, abused little girl again. The threats from the loan sharks became more and more violent. They threatened to hurt Victor, and in her mind, twisted by fear and desperation, she came to believe the only way out was to eliminate me. "It wasn't until I was in this cell," she wrote, staring at 25 years of my life wasted, that I could finally see clearly. I saw that I had become exactly like my father, that I had sacrificed everything human in me chasing the money I thought would save me. Victor genuinely loved me. You had treated me with kindness. And I destroyed it all because I couldn't see past my own terror. The letter ended with these words: I've been in therapy here in prison. I've worked to understand the patterns that led me to do something so monstrous. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness, because I know that is neither possible nor fair. I am writing because I needed you to know that the person who tried to kill you no longer exists. I have died and been reborn in this prison. And even though I will spend the rest of my useful life here, at least I will spend it being honest with myself for the first time. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for being stronger than my evil. And if I can ever, in any way, do anything to make up for even a fraction of the harm I caused, I will. With all my regret, Patricia. When I finished reading, I sat down at the kitchen table and cried. But they weren't tears of anger or pain. They were tears of something more complex. Understanding. It didn't justify what Patricia had done. I would never justify it. But for the first time, I could see her not as a monster, but as a broken human being who had made terrible choices, driven by traumas she had never healed. I showed the letter to Victor that night. He read it in silence, tears falling onto the paper. What are you going to do? He asked when he finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it, to move on as if this letter never arrived. But another part what? Another part feels that if we've built this foundation on the idea of giving second chances to women the world abandoned, maybe I should be consistent with those values. Victor looked at me with astonishment. Mom, are you saying you want to forgive her? I don't know if I can ever fully forgive her. But maybe I can answer her letter. Maybe I can acknowledge her humanity without excusing her actions. Is that possible? Victor thought for a long time before answering. I think it's more than possible. I think it's exactly what Dad would have wanted you to do. He kept all those secrets trying to protect us. And look where it got us. Maybe the answer isn't more walls, more secrets, more anger. Maybe the answer is the exact opposite. I spent a week thinking about what to write. Finally, one early morning, I sat down with pen and paper and let the words flow. Patricia, I received your letter. I won't lie and say it was easy to read, or that forgiveness comes naturally. The fear I felt during those months, the knowledge that someone in my own family wanted me dead, that left scars that will probably never fully heal. But I've also learned something in these 2 years. I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I've built something beautiful from the ashes of what you tried to destroy. I've helped dozens of women rebuild their lives. And in that process, I have rebuilt myself. Your letter showed me something I hadn't seen before. That you are also a victim of a system that taught you that human value is measured in money. It does not excuse what you did. Victims can also become victimizers. But it helps me understand. I can't say I forgive you completely. That's a process that might take the rest of my life. But I can say this. I see you. I see your humanity. I see your regret. And I hope you use these years in prison to become who you really want to be, not who your father taught you to be. Victor is well. He is happy. He's in a new relationship with a good woman. He is doing important work helping vulnerable women. He has become the man he was always meant to be. I won't tell him about this letter unless he asks. That decision is his. Take care, Patricia. And I hope you find peace, even behind those walls. Sonia. I sent the letter, knowing it might be a mistake, that I might be opening myself up to be hurt again. But also knowing it was the right thing to do. That I couldn't preach compassion and second chances for other women if I wasn't willing to extend even a tiny portion of that compassion to someone who seemed genuinely repentant. 3 weeks later, I received another letter from Patricia. This one was shorter, just 1 page. Thank you for seeing me as human when you had every right to see me as a monster. I will not write to you again unless you want me to, but I want you to know that your letter changed something in me. It gave me hope that maybe, someday, I can do something worthwhile with the rest of my life. I am studying to be a prison counselor, to help other women who are where I was, full of rage and fear and making terrible decisions. Your example showed me the way. Thank you, Sonia, for everything. Patricia. I didn't answer that letter. I didn't need to. We had both said what we needed to say, and now we could each continue on our own paths of healing. 5 years have passed since that night when a lie saved my life. 5 years that have been the fullest, most meaningful, most truly lived of my entire existence. I am now 75 years old, and although my body constantly reminds me of my age with aches and pains, my spirit feels younger than ever. The Richard and Sonia Foundation has expanded to 5 cities. We help over 200 women a year, providing them not only with housing but also job training, psychological support, medical care, and most importantly, community. We have created a network of women who support each other, who care for each other, who understand that true wealth isn't in the numbers in a bank account, but in the human connections we build. Victor married Carmen 2 years ago. It was a small, beautiful wedding in the Foundation's gardens, surrounded by all the women who had found a home with us. Seeing my son exchange vows with a woman who genuinely loves him, who respects him, who makes him a better person, was one of the happiest moments of my life. And 6 months ago, they gave me the news I never thought I'd hear. I'm going to be a grandmother. Carmen is pregnant with a baby girl. They're going to name her Sophia. Rosa and I are still inseparable. She jokes that we're like those old movies where 2 friends end up being more family than blood relatives. And she's right. Together, we've created something that will outlast us both, something that will survive long after we're gone. This morning, on the exact anniversary of that terrible night, I decided to do something I had been putting off. I drove to the cemetery where my husband is buried. I hadn't visited in months, not because I had forgotten him, but because I no longer needed to go to his grave to feel close to him. But today, I felt I needed to talk to him. I sat on the grass by his headstone, feeling the warm spring breeze, listening to the birds sing in the nearby trees. And I began to talk. Richard, it's been 5 years since everything changed. 5 years since I discovered your secrets, since I almost died because of the money you saved. For a long time, I was furious with you. Furious about the lies, the secrets, for putting us in danger with your silence. But I see it differently now. I paused, wiping the tears that started to fall. You did what you thought was right. You carried a terrible burden alone, trying to protect us. And while I don't agree with how you handled it, I understand the love that motivated every decision. That money that scared you so much, that money that almost got me killed, I turned it into something beautiful. I created a foundation in your name that helps women no one else helps. I gave our son a chance to be better than he was. And I gave myself a life of purpose and meaning. The wind blew stronger, rustling the leaves in the trees. And for an absurd but beautiful moment, it felt like his answer. I learned something from all this, my love. I learned that secrets destroy, that money without purpose is just paper, that true family is built on honesty and vulnerability, not protection and control. And I learned that it's never too late to start over, to become who you truly want to be. I stayed there for another hour, remembering the good times we had together, forgiving him completely for the mistakes, thanking him for the legacy that, however complicated, had given me the chance to do something important with my life. That afternoon, the foundation organized a celebration. It was the 5th anniversary of our opening. All the residents were there, along with volunteers, donors, and staff. Victor gave an emotional speech about how the foundation had not only saved lives, but had created a new definition of family. Carmen spoke about the impact we had made on the community. And then they asked me to say a few words. I stood in front of all those people, looking at their faces, seeing the stories of survival written in every wrinkle, every scar, every smile. And I knew exactly what to say. 5 years ago, someone tried to kill me. Someone in my own family saw my life as an obstacle to their financial prosperity. That experience could have destroyed me. It could have filled me with bitterness, with fear, with mistrust for all of humanity. But instead, it taught me the most important lesson of my life. I paused, looking especially at the resident women who were watching me intently. It taught me that true wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in the lives you touch, in the people you help, in the love you share. Every one of you, every woman who has walked through these doors, has enriched my life in ways no amount of money ever could. You have taught me about resilience, about hope, about the incredible capacity of the human spirit to heal and grow, even after the deepest trauma. I saw tears on many faces. Rosa was crying openly. Victor had his arm around Carmen, both of them smiling through their tears. When I was young, I thought life was linear. You were born, you grew up, you got married, you had children, you got old, you died. A straight line from beginning to end. But now, at 75 years old, I know that life is more like a spiral. We circle back, facing the same issues again and again, but each time from a different height, with a wider perspective. And the moments we think are going to destroy us often turn out to be the very moments that transform us into who we were truly meant to be. I raised my glass of juice because at my age, champagne doesn't agree with me anymore. I toast all of you. To the brave women who found the courage to ask for help. To the volunteers who give their time and hearts. To my son, who found his way back to himself. To Rosa, my sister in everything but blood. And to my husband, Richard, who, despite his mistakes, gave me the means to create all this. May we continue to build bridges where others build walls. May we continue to choose compassion where others choose vengeance. And may we never forget that every person, regardless of their age or circumstance, deserves dignity, respect, and a second chance. The celebration continued late into the night. There was music, dancing, laughter. I saw women in their 80s dancing like teenagers, forgetting their aches and worries for a moment. I saw community, true family, love that asked for nothing in return. When everyone had left and the house was quiet, I stepped out onto the porch. It was almost midnight. The stars were shining brightly in the clear sky. The orange trees whispered softly in the night breeze. And for the first time in 5 years, my phone rang at an unusual hour. For a second, my heart jumped with a memory of fear. But when I saw the caller ID, I smiled. It was Victor. "Mom, are you awake?" "Yes, son. Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect. Carmen and I were talking and, well, we wanted to ask you something important. Tell me, when Sophia is born, would you like to live with us? Not so you can help us take care of her, although of course we'd love your help, but because we want you to be part of her daily life. We want her to grow up seeing you, learning from you, knowing the incredible woman you are." The tears started to fall again, but they were tears of pure joy. "I would love that, son. I would love that." After hanging up, I sat there on the porch, looking at the house my husband built, the house that almost became my tomb, the house that was now a symbol of survival and transformation. And I thought about the entire journey. I thought about that night, 5 years ago, when a simple lie on the phone changed the course of my life. How fear transformed into strength. How betrayal transformed into opportunity. How money stained by secrets transformed into hope for hundreds of women. The truth can destroy, but it also liberates. Secrets can protect for a moment, but eventually, they poison. And true love isn't the kind that hides and controls, but the kind that trusts and sets free. My daughter-in-law used to call me every night, asking if I was alone. She thought my loneliness made me vulnerable, an easy target, but she was wrong, because I was never really alone. I had Rosa, I had Victor in my heart. I had the strength that comes from 70 years of life. And now I have 200 women who call me friend, mentor, sister. Life taught me that sometimes a lie can save you, but it's the truth that sets you free.